Closer and closer he forced me to the glass coffin. A few moments more, and my ashes would join those of the girl I had loved. I stumbled across the taboret, and my fingers closed over the jar of ashes. With one last superhuman effort, I raised it high above my head and brought it down with crushing force upon the skull of my antagonist. His arm relaxed. His limp form dropped in a senseless heap to the floor. Still acting upon impulse, I raised the silent form of the professor, and carefully, lest I should spill some of it on the floor, lowered the body into the casket of death. A moment, and it was over. Professor and liquid both were gone, and in their place was a little some of it on the floor. Lowered the body into the casket of death. A moment, and it was over. Professor and liquid both were gone, and in their place was a little pile of soft, white ashes. As I gazed at my handiwork, the brainstorm passed away, and I came face to face with the cold, hard truth that I had killed a fellow being. An unnatural calm possessed me. I knew that there was not a single shred of evidence against me, barring the fact that I was the last one known to be alone with the professor. Nothing remained but ashes. I put on my hat and coat, told the butler that the professor had left word he was not to be disturbed, and that I was going out for the evening. Once outside, all my self-possession vanished. My nerves were shot to pieces. I don't know where I went, only that I wandered aimlessly here and there, until I found myself outside your apartment just a little while ago. Prague. I felt as if I must talk with someone, that I must unburden my tortured mind. I knew that I could trust you, old pal. So I've told you the whole story. Here I am. Do with me as you will. Life holds nothing more for me, now that Marjorie is gone. Bruce's voice trembled with emotion and broke as he mentioned the name of the girl he loved. I leaned across the table and gazed searchingly into the eyes of the abject figure that slouched dejectedly in the big chair. Then I rose, put on my hat and coat, crossed to Bruce, who had buried his head in his hands and was shaking with silent sobs. "Bruce!" Malcolm Bruce raised his eyes. "Bruce, listen to me. Are you sure Marjorie Purdy is dead?" "I'm sure that is wise." I didn't at the suggestion, and sat erect with a sudden start. "Exactly," I went on. "Are you positive that the ashes in the jar were the ashes of Marjorie Purdy?" "Why, see here, Prague. What are you driving at?" "Then you're not sure. You saw the girl's hat and coat in the chair. In your state of mind, you jumped at conclusions. The ashes must be those of the missing girl. The professor must have made away with her. And all that. Come now, did Ben Allister tell you anything?" "I don't know what he said. I tell you I went berserk. Mad. Then you come along with me. If she's not dead, she must be somewhere in that house. If she is there, we're going to find her." On the street, we hailed a taxi. In a few moments, the butler admitted us to Van Allister's home. Bruce led us into the laboratory with his key. The door of the workshop was still ajar. My eyes swept the room in a comprehensive survey. At the left, over the near window, was a closed door. I strode across the room and tried the knob, but it refused to yield. "Where does that lead?" "Just an anteroom, where the professor keeps his apparatus." "All the same, that door's coming open." I returned grimly. Stepping back a pace or two, I planted a well-directed kick upon the door, another and still another, and the framework around the lock gave way. Bruce, with an inarticulate cry, sped across the room to a huge mahogany chest. He selected one of the keys on his ring, inserted it in the lock, and flung back the cover with trembling hands. "Here she is, Prague. Quick, get her out where there's air." Together we bore the limp figure of the girl into the laboratory. Bruce hastily mixed a concoction which he forced between her lips. A second dose, and her eyes slowly opened. likely some serious drug. Her bewildered glance traveled around the room, at last resting on Bruce, and her eyes lighted with sudden happy recognition. Later, after the first few moments of reunion, the girl told us her story. After Malcolm went out this afternoon, the professor sent word to me to come into the workshop, as he often summoned me to do some errand or other. I thought nothing of it, and to save time, I took my hat and coat along. He closed the door of the little room without warning, attacked me from behind. He overpowered me, tied me hand and foot. It was needless to gag me. As you know, the laboratory is absolutely soundproof, and he produced a huge Newfoundland dog he had secured from somewhere or other, reduced it to ashes before my very eyes, and put the ashes in a glass jar that was on a taparet in the workshop. He went into the anteroom, and from that chest where you found me, he took out the glass casket. At least, it seemed a casket to my terror-stricken eyes. He mixed enough of his horrible liquid to fill it almost to the brim. Then he told me that but one thing remained. That was to perform the experiment upon a human being. She shuddered at the recollection. He dilated at length upon what a privilege it would be for anyone to sacrifice his life in such a manner. Can't they use a corpse? Well, that's desecrating a corpse, but for such a cause. And he calmly informed me that he had selected you as the subject of his next experiment, and that I was to play the role of witness. I fainted. The professor must have feared some sort of intrusion, for the next I remember waking inside the chest where he discovered me. It was stifling. Every breath I took came harder and harder. I thought of you, Malcolm. Thought of the wonderful happy hours we spent together the last few days. I wondered what I would do when you were gone. I even prayed that he would kill me, too. My throat grew parched and dry. Everything went black before my eyes. Next, I opened them to find myself here, with you, Malcolm. Her voice sank to a hoarse, nervous whisper. Where? Where is the professor? Bruce silently led her into the workshop. She shivered as the coffin of glass came within her range of vision. She silently crossed directly to the casket, and taking up a handful of the soft, white ashes, let them sift slowly through his fingers. And, well, you could reach too far in that sort of circumstance. There's a lot of, take caution when dealing with dangerous substances and stuff. But you got to be careful of your judgment, even in strong emotions, to be able to react accordingly and in terms of what possible consequence could be afterwards. Morality aside, you got to, don't want to be too hasty, but sometimes you're dead on. You think, he's going to kill someone. Oh, he planned to kill me. And, you could definitely see in that instant that he was, attacked by the professor. So, well, I mean this is fiction, but Ashes is a good place to end this Lovecraftian series. I will probably return to this another year, but it's going to be months at least. So it's away from fiction, but I thought that there was spiritual connections that I could make to sharing these and letting it give me an experience.